What's a random fact that recently blew your mind? Story 1. I recently read Wake, The Hidden History of Women-Led Slave Revolts by Rebecca Hall, and I learned several related things that were very interesting. Most people sold into the transatlantic slave trade were war captives, often fighting people. The Kingdom of Dahomey, among others, had entire fighting groups made up of exclusively female soldiers who were highly trained and very effective. European slavers would leave their female captives unchained on the decks of their slave ships, both to be chivalrous to the women and also so they would be available for the use of the men on the crew. They seem to have struggled mentally with the idea that women could be war fighters at all, much less effective ones. Even when revolting against their captors meant certain death in the middle of the Atlantic on a boat they couldn't sail, there were violent rebellions on fully 1 in 10 of every slave trading voyage across the Atlantic. No wonder the entire insurance industry grew from the riskiness of slave trading. The single biggest factor predicting whether any given voyage would experience a violent rebellion in transit was the percentage of women in the cargo. The more women, the more chance of a revolt. Story 2. Technically speaking, fishes and trees don't exist. Sometimes these oddities are due to a linguistic confusion. There's an ordinary word which denotes a practical category. 2. This ordinary word is adopted as a scientific word, or there is an attempt to find a scientific definition for it. 3. Scientific sense is said to be the correct sense for. The ordinary word now raises complications. In some cases, the adoption of the scientific sense has a reason. A classic case is the redefinition of whales as animals rather than fish, which alters our perception of them. In other cases, the scientific and ordinary language uses are in conflict. For example, bird is, in terms of practical experience, a clear and useful category. It was assumed that birds, mammals, and reptiles were different evolutionary branches. However, it is now known that if you draw the family tree, birds are a branch within reptiles, and in fact within the otherwise extinct dinosaurs. Hence, in terms of clades, they belong to the reptiles. But in terms of ordinary life, this is too far from our normal experience to be useful. In these cases of biology, it doesn't matter much usually, but it's worth noting because in politics, etc., switching between two senses of a word, a linguistic bait and switch, is a common source of confusion, sometimes deliberate. Story 3. Something called a gravester. It hasn't been proven yet, so this may not fit the question as you asked for a fact. But a few different science channels on YouTube, Kurzgesagt being one of them, fairly recently made videos on them. So I figured I'd share here for if they ever do get proven to exist. Any woozy, they are basically created under very similar circumstances as a black hole, the death of a gigantic star. But instead of becoming a singularity that warps space and time to such an extreme degree that causes its gravitational pull to be so strong that not even light can escape, it becomes a hollow thing. I don't know exactly how they're formed, but I do remember that it is said they have a solid surface. It is entirely hollow inside. There are no atoms, nor even subatomic particles within. A true vacuum. But there's still an extremely high amount of energy within them. It's the vacuum energy of the entire cosmos. It can permeate these stars. The crazy thing, though, is their surface. It's damn near literally indestructible. And it's thinner than an atom. So yeah, its surface is thinner than the diameter of an atom, I suppose a hydrogen atom, yet it is indestructible. If you try to add something to it, its inside will not fill up. It will just grow larger and retain its structural integrity. Also, they're absolutely dark. I may be using the word absolutely incorrectly here. They do not shine. They are black. But are they absolutely black? I don't know. I don't know if they can reflect light. I'd suppose they could since they have a physical and solid surface, but what they would look like is beyond me. Story 4. At one point in time, all the details of the Manhattan Project were in 3 safes, each locked with the code 271828. Mathematicians would, of course, recognize these numbers as the Euler number, a number that has wide importance in calculus. Physicist Richard Feynman was able to crack into these safes after snooping around the secretary's desk and finding the number pi. After thinking, why would a secretary need to know the value of pi? He deduced it was probably a code, so he tried it on the safes. After they didn't work, he tried other numbers that mathematicians and physicists would use, and sure enough, He worked. After he got into the safes, he thought to pull a prank on the director by leaving little notes in the safe to scare the director into thinking that a spy had gotten in. Story 5. Something I found out very recently. If you're doing intensive workouts for losing weights or otherwise, your body produces a large amount of creatinine for the new muscle and proteins. At the same time, if your kidneys start failing, they cannot filter out stuff as efficiently. Creatinine is one substance that the doctors look at while testing you for kidney disease. I was working on losing weight and had some health issues, so I went to the doctor. They told me immediately that my kidneys are failing and I probably will need emergency care. A week of tests and a lot of payments later, I didn't have any kidney issues. It turns out that the creatinine levels were high just because of my intense workout plan. So if you are diagnosed for kidney failure, make sure to do an ultrasound first. If you're doing heavy workouts, you may be misdiagnosed for kidney failure. Story 6. Greeks who settled in modern Iran, Alexandria, Skete, battled the Han Chinese for horses. It also possibly led to the Silk Road's formation. The Chinese wanted the Greeks' horses to fight the Mongols' Xiongnu as they were ideal for war. China demanded them in tribute and offered to pay for them, but the Greeks refused. The Han emperor decided to collect them by force. 20,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry set out on the long journey. On the long journey, General Li Guangli got into multiple petty conflicts in trying to get supplies, and his force dwindled to only a fraction of what they had. The Greeks refused, and there really wasn't anything China could do. So the emperor triples the amount of men for the next journey like an absolute Chad. 60,000 soldiers and 100,000 oxen made their way. Along the way, the cities that once fought him now cooperated. Still, Li lost half his soldiers to desert exposure. The Greeks fought for a while, but the Chinese ultimately broke through the outer wall. The nobles assassinated their king and offered as many horses as the Chinese would like, 6,000. Their victory made the city-states along the way assimilate into the Han dynasty and led to new puppet states outside of that. This was likely what opened up the Silk Road. Story 7. There is a planet about 40 to 50 light years away called 55 Cancri E, made entirely out of diamond that would break the economy. The star Betelgeuse may be about to go supernova, causing the first supernova in our galaxy for over 300 years. Despite an average of 1 or 2 supernovae in a galaxy per century, and due to how far away it is. If it is going supernova, then it did it a few centuries ago, but we're only just seeing the light from it. Our solar system may have a red dwarf star called Nemesis that orbits our sun every 26 million years, spending most of its time in the also theoretical Oort cloud that starts just over a light year away and ends about 3.6 light years away from the sun. The idea that started the show called the 100, which follows an extinction event similar to the dinosaurs and is set 26 million years after that. In the show, 100 people are sent back to Earth where they find survivors of the extinction but act as the enemies. Watch the show if you haven't, because it is pretty good. Uranus went through many different names, and its current one has 3 accepted pronunciations. The name that William Herschel, the man who discovered it, decided on was George, as the King of England at the time was King George, however. Other names proposed were Herschel, after the man who discovered it, Neptune, Urania, and finally Uranus. Neptune was the first and currently only planet in our solar system to have been discovered via maths. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn were all visible with the naked eye, and we are on Earth. Uranus is barely visible and took until the 17 or 1800s to be discovered by Herschel. Story 8. To maintain the signifiers of class distinctions in 1337, Edward III mandated that fur was prohibited as an embellishment for attires for anyone inferior to the rank of knight. Due to defiance against such repressive practices and the advocates for progression as years of social inertia, sumptuary laws were passed. The restrictions were draconian from a modern perspective. It's unfathomable for your social prestige and concomitant class to be denoted by your clothes alone. The legislation was met with disdain and obstinacy. People continued to indulge in accoutrements belonging to other classes, so the law was amended in 1363. Prerequisite incomes and assets now dictated what you could wear. It was so stringent that even servants were restricted Fabrics worth no more than 2 marks for the whole cloth. No gold, silver, embroidery, enamelware, or silk. Women not to wear a veil worth more than 12 dins. Naturally, royalty and the aristocracy were exempted. They were exhorted to exhibit their exalted rank with extravagance. No story, short version. Almost all calico and tortoiseshell cats are female, due to the fact that their coat pattern can only be created by having at least two X chromosomes. Longer version. I say almost all, and at least two, because male cats with chromosomal disorders can sometimes have two X chromosomes, which can give them the calico coat. Why two X's? Coat color is determined by two separate segments of genes. One determines if color is present. If not, that makes white. And the other determines whether the color is orange or black. The orange-black gene is stored on the X chromosome. So female cats have two versions, one from each parent, while male cats only have one. As such, male cats can only display solid color and white color patterns, never both orange and black or tricolor patterns. So what happens when you have both X's in one cell? What color does the cell express? Early in cell development, some of the X chromosomes in cells will become inactive, since there's already a second functioning X in the cell. That inactive X is called a bar body, and it contains the DNA for the color that is not expressed. Cat's fur is a mosaic of cells, so each one can express its own color separately from the rest. Therefore, some will have only orange DNA, some only black, and some will have the color-inhibiting gene and make white patches instead. Story 10. It's a myth that cows have 4 stomachs. They actually don't. See, cows have one stomach that is divided into 4 sections. Inside of a section of the cow's stomach called the rumen, you can find tiny bacteria called protozoa that will basically change the nutrients cows ingest into what they actually need. For example, if you were to feed a cow a high-protein diet of 50 protein, but the cow didn't need all that protein, the protozoa would change maybe 20% of that protein into something the cow actually needed, like carbs, for instance. This is why cows can ingest just grass and still get everything they need out of it to survive. Pretty random, but kinda cool. Imagine if humans had this in their stomach. I'm on mobile at the moment, so sorry for any errors. Story 11. Starting from 1840 and ending in 1960, every U.S. president that won an election in a year that was a multiple of 20 died in office. William Henry Harrison won in 1840 and died, a month after inauguration. Lincoln, James Garfield, and McKinley won in 1880 and 1900 and were each assassinated. Harding won in 1920 and couldn't complete his term. FDR won his third term in 1940 and then died shortly after winning his fourth. And lastly, JFK won the 1960 election and was assassinated. The streak ended with Reagan, won in 1980, but even he had an assassination attempt that he survived. Story 12. Biting through a human finger is as easy as biting through a carrot, but your brain has a safety feature that prevents you from biting down with full strength when you have a finger in your mouth. This is to prevent you from amputating your own fingers. In fact, your body could very easily tear itself apart if it wasn't kept in check. Humans only access about 1/3 of all their muscle strands when applying force. This is because your brain caps your strength. Uncapped, applying your body's full force in the wrong way could tear your muscles off your own bones, or even snap those bones. In times of extreme stress, this cap can disappear. Hence humans who have been capable of incredible feats of strength in extreme circumstances, like the myth of the mother who lifts a car to save her baby. This is also the key difference between humans and other great apes. Chimpanzees are 10 times stronger than humans because not only do they have more muscle fibers, they have access to all of their strength. The trade-off for this is that delicate work is a lot harder for them to do, and thus they're incapable of complex tool-making. Humans, not having access to their full strength, can do a lot of extremely delicate tasks with precision. Story 13. Really old breweries in Europe usually have a historic origin in abbeys. The monks used the liquid bread to get their nutritions during Lent. The Pope needed to approve what you wanted to consume during that time, so legend has it that monks strapped 2 barrels of beer on a donkey and rode with it over the Alps down to Rome to present it to the Pope. You can imagine that it wasn't in the best condition when it came there. No risk of being interpreted as a drink for recreation. Other anecdotes about the monks of old: beavers were declared as fish, since they live in the water. Maltaschen, a local specialty in Swabia, have a nickname of something akin to God Swindler, since they contain, among other things, meat inside their dough, so God wouldn't see them eating it during Lent. Story 14. In Animal Crossing New Leaf, when talking to Isabel, she'll state she's a fan of and has a crush on KK Slider, to the point where she even has merchandise of his, like a poster, but asks the player to not mention it to her twin brother, Digby. Also, while on the topic of Digby, he also has a bit of background romance going on in the game franchise with his coworker Lottie. Lottie and Digby both work at the Happy Home Academy alongside Lottie's uncle Lyle. During the game Happy Home Designer, if the player creates a house for Digby, the next time they visit his house, Lottie will be there. Digby then tells the player that he and Lottie are on a date. Cute! Story 15. Gru is the most powerful being in the universe. And here's why. According to the height of a minion, which is 3.5 feet on average, Gru is 4 minions tall, which means he is a godly size of 10 feet tall. Second, if any of you remember the original Despicable Me, you know there is a scene when Vector kidnaps the three girls and shoots a series of heat-seeking missiles at Gru. He then dodged them all. According to the speed of an average ballistic missile, 1900 miles per hour, and the size of the missile, according to his ankle size, Gru can perceive and move at such a speed that the missiles only move 9.5 miles per hour, 0.5% of their original speed. Plus, after this, Gru punches a shark and it is paralyzed, meaning its spine is probably shattered. To remind you, it would require a force greater than 3,000 newtons to fracture the spine. That's equal to the impact created by a 500-pound car crashing into a wall at 30 miles per hour. Story 16. Nikola Tesla nearly destroyed the world once, or at least he claimed to do so. He is a strong candidate for the smartest person of all time. One of the things he did was study resonance. He built a machine that would apply the resonance harmonic frequency to whatever it was attached to. When the resonance harmonic frequency of a material is applied to it, will start to vibrate more and more, eventually shaking apart sea glass near opera singers. While he was doing the testing, it got stuck on while attached into something that made it, and the Earth the same system. As a result, an earthquake started, and if left unchecked within a few hours, would have wiped out all life on Earth, and within 2 weeks or so would have broken the Earth apart completely. He managed to destroy the machine, saving the world from himself. Before you disregard this, know that Tesla invented our modern electrical system, wireless technology, robotics, and just so many other things. Story scene. The use of the term parsec in Star Wars, it's the ship that made the Kessel run in 12 parsecs, makes it seem like a measurement of time being the fastest Kessel run, but in reality it was a measurement of distance, which is what a parsec is. The inaccuracy, though, is that parsec is a very specific Earth distance. They use the same actual distance in the movie, even though that distance would not be considered a parsec anywhere else but Earth. A parsec is the measurement of how much a star moves given the orbit of Earth. Since Earth has a diameter of 2 AU, if a star moves 2 arcseconds in the sky because of the parallax of our orbit, it is 1 parsec away. Since the distance relies on our orbit, it makes no sense that an entire galaxy would rely on this distance. Story 18. Polar bears have completely black skin. The color black absorbs heat better, so that's why. A Spartan warrior once thought he saw a ghost. His reaction was to charge at it with a spear and basically yell, "Why are you running away from me? You've already died," or something like that. You should be able to look that up. Another fact about the Spartans is that people at the time thought they were incredibly stupid, but Socrates argued that they were hiding their intelligence, and it only shows when they reply. One example of a clever reply was when a foreigner went to Sparta and stood on one leg for a really long time. He said to a Spartan man, "I bet you can't stand on one leg as long as that." To which the Spartan replied, "Maybe, but there isn't a single duck which cannot do it." Story 19. The Florentine Camerata was a group of philosophers, mathematicians, and scientists who believed that they were going to revitalize an old Greek art form by writing a musical that was entirely singing. No dialogue, just music nonstop. This art form didn't actually exist, so they invented the opera. So they managed to get permission to put on what was the very first opera, which took place at a wedding. And guess what story they decided to tell at a wedding? The story of Orpheus. You know, the one where the guy gets married and his wife immediately dies by snake bite, which leads Orpheus to go on a mission into the underworld to get her out. A task that he ultimately fails in because he looked at her before they got out, at a wedding. Also, note that I said they were philosophers, mathematicians, and scientists, not musicians or costume designers. Story 20. EMV stands for Eurocard MasterCard Visa, which were the first major credit and debit card companies to introduce chips onto their cards. The new chips are actually kind of like memory cards and hold numbers, which change every time you use your card to make a payment. The information is encrypted and sent to your card provider, where they decrypt it, approve the transaction, and send back new numbers that are put onto your card. The new SPM, secure payment methods, card readers, are very touchy, and when breached, they stop working. So if someone happened to try to install a skimming device at a gas pump, the card transactions would immediately stop. New law has been passed in the US that all gas stations will need to have these SPM card readers at every pump upgraded to these within the next year to cut down on credit card fraud. Story 21. The fastest object ever launched from Earth was a manhole cover. During a nuclear test in the 1950s, a nuclear warhead was detonated in an underground hole capped by a 4-inch thick manhole cover. The test went normally, and with no sign of the manhole cover, people assumed it was vaporized on detonation. This is until the ultra-high-speed camera footage of the detonation was viewed, and the manhole cover was actually partially visible, flying off for one frame. Because of the speed of the camera, that means the manhole cover was moving at least 125,000 miles per hour, 5 times the escape velocity of Earth, so fast it likely didn't have time to disintegrate in the atmosphere, and likely escapes Earth's orbit. Story 22. On March 12, 2009, men's college basketball team Syracuse faced off against UConn in the Big East Championship quarterfinal. The winner would go to the Big East semis. The game went to 6 overtimes and 3 different buzzer beaters. It was a school night for many, including myself, and I was living in a mountain standard zone. The game was held at Madison Square Garden in New York City. I believe the game ended sometime around 3 a.m. in New York, so 1 a.m. Mountain Time. Syracuse pulled the W in the 6th overtime, 127-117. Some say this was the greatest college basketball game ever played. The teams consisted of ride-or-die New Yorkers and electric three-shooters like Eric Devendorf and Andy Routens, but also fiery point guards like Johnny Flynn, and at the time an 18-year-old you may know now as Kemba Walker. I remember watching this game on a Thursday night, and I could not take my eyes off the TV, went to what had to been 6th or 7th grade class the next day, and told all my friends, and they had no idea what had just taken place the night before. Not until they got a chance to watch Sports Center after school. I know this was a butt of story, but also a completely random fact about a basketball game that I hope some of you guys remember.